Okay, for the second part of our texturing the sword and substance painter part 2, we're going to do some normals and some bump map stuff inside of here, at least some faking of the way things push out. So how do we do that? There's a couple ways to do it in here. And then we're going to actually add some emission. I'm going to show you all that kind of fun stuff too. And then for the homework, I believe you have to have a crystal blade, so a little bit of transparency, even though it's not going to show up too great. Some rust on the blade, some glowing parts, you know, the embossing and the engraving. So engraving would be engraving and embossing are the normal. So if I wanted to engrave or emboss something in here, embossing being pushed out and engraving being pushed in, I would add a new layer. Now I can do this two ways. So I'm going to start with the way that a lot of people do it, and we'll just push this as the basic right here. What I can do is turn off everything in this case but the normal map and the height, or just the height. Now all I have to do is come into this layer with a pen or with your cursor and decide how strong or how weak you want. Oops. How you want the engraving to be. Come on. So if I look at this right by default, it should start right there at 0. If I go down and then I draw, it's going to carve in. If I go up above 0 and I draw, it's going to carve out. Now it's all fake, so let me turn this around for you here. Look, there's no real geometry change. This is all just a trick of the eye. But, you know, the great thing about doing it in this layer like this is that if you know that you want to have high and low, you can do some high stuff and then come back in and then do, let's say, a negative version of that too. It works fine. I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I think that it gets a little bit messy, and of course you can always hold the shift and click somewhere, shift and then drag, and if you hold control it'll be a straight line. You can do that. And what that did, goodness, is it just did a cut inside of my sword like that, and you know, you can do all that stuff. But the way we're going to do it, or the way I'm going to do it for this, now you can just draw your own bevels and embosses this way, or you can do it the other way, and the way that most of us do it. And I'll show you how to do that. So all I'm going to do is delete this one real quick. Oh, let me show you the fill too. Well, I'm going to show you the fill way. So I'm going to do a fill. And now you remember that with you're in a fill, you can't do anything. You can't draw, you can't paint or anything like that. But you can tell it to turn off everything but the height map again. So we're just going to go down here and go height. And we can turn it up or down. Now it doesn't look like it's doing anything. That's because it's doing it across the whole object. So it's really, since it's all virtual, it's not going to work great. But if I come in here and I drag a mask in here and say black mask, and then take my pen inside of the mask and draw, you'll see that it's revealing some of the extrusion or the embossing. Now again, I can take this and turn it down or up. Wait, wrong one. I can come back to the height and I can turn it down or up. Now this is what I was saying, that you can't do up and down at the same time in this method, but you can do you know, the whole thing at one time, which is kind of useful if you have something you're specifically doing. So another way to do this is, instead of drawing it by hand like I was just talking about, we can go in here and remove the mask. So we have no mask. Again, you won't see much of anything. You can go into something like Photoshop and find some images that you like, or you can just find them on the internet. And what I did is I found them, and then I turned on my UVW, and I figured out where I want these symbols to sit on the sword, and I just made an alpha mask made of all black. Turn off the UVW, and now I've got this. And then when I saved it, I imported it in, and now instead of saying mask, I can say bitmap mask, and I click on that, and if I looked up sword, and by the way you can search, so it'll show you every image, and if you say SWORD, because that was the name of the file, it's sword ruins. So I just click on that, And now it's in my mask. So it's got both sides of the sword because I laid it out on there. And I can turn it up or I can turn it down depending on how deep, or if I wanted to go, I can push it down deeper. I can go back out. And that's one way of really quickly putting your embossings in there. And plus you have a little bit more control because you're thinking about it inside the UVs. The other thing we want to do is talk about making it colored too. So I want to put some color inside of here. To do that, I can add another layer, throw this mask on it and everything like that, but let's talk about a different way of doing that. Let's just add a fill inside of here, so it's adding inside of the layer, and inside that layer now I've got this white. Now I can again turn off rough, height, metal, normal, and this is the white that we see right here. If I want to change that color, I just go ahead and drag it to a different color. And now, not only do I have my extrusions, but now I've got my paint too. Okay, so pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Let's talk about one more thing we can do too. We talked about making it glow or making it have an emission. I'm not going to show you the filter to make it glow, but I am going to show you the first steps of making something feel like it's glowing with the emission. So if you remember back, if we look at this, we have color, metal, rough, normal, height, but we don't have anything else. Well, if we come inside of where we bake our textures, you'll notice that the channels that we have to work with are base, color, metallic, rough, normal, height. We don't have anything else, and it matches exactly what we have here. And if you notice, these are all minuses next to it, but there's a plus right above it. If you click that plus, you'll see emissive. You click on the emissive word, and now you have an emissive channel. And if you look over here, there's an emissive channel that's not being used. So if I turn on the emissive channel, and in default it should be black, by the way. So if it's black, nothing's going to happen. I'm going to turn off the color for now. If I turn on the emissive channel and it's black, nothing happens. But if I take it and I change the color to something else, like green, now it's glowing green. And how do I know it's glowing? Because if I was in a dark area, there are no shadows on it. It's not being lit. This is the lit side, and that's the dark side. So it's, if I want to look at it different, I can change the picture to something a little bit more like this, maybe. There's the dark side, and there's the lit side. Okay, so it's glowing, it's emissive. Now in a game engine, if you have an emissive channel, it can actually cast light, but a lot of times we turn that part of it off because it's a little expensive, so we actually just add an object light to it, or just a light to the object. But nevertheless, this is how you turn on an emissive. So just like that though, let's make something glass or transparent. How would I do that? I'm not going to add it to this one. I might as well turn my color back on, and I get some really weird orangey stuff because I've got the red and the green fighting with each other. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Turn that back off. I want this one. I want to go back to my fill and turn on this color because it's where I had the red. And then, I can do it something. Let's do red, and instead of green, let's do blue, so you can see that it makes purple. So it's a blue emissive on a red background. You're going to get this purpley kind of thing, pink purple, almost pink. Okay, so that's how you do emissive. Now the same way you do emissive is how you do a opacity on it too. You would just go over to here and say not there. I'm sorry. Come over to here and say plus, and you'll see there's an opacity channel. Now, if I come down to here, and turn this a little bit straight on. If I come down to here and I look at this, opacity channel just showed up. I don't think that's going to show up. The one thing about opacity is it only shows up in the other viewports. Let me turn off the emission. Oops, that's the wrong one. I'm going to go to the fill and do it again. I don't want to do it on the main one. I want to do it right here. Opacity. I'm going to turn off the emission in that. And I'm not sure exactly what we're going to see. Opacity works really well for glass windows and stuff like that. I just, you can put it on your crystals if you want. But I just want to see one of your files that has it in it at this point, just so you understand that you're adding it in. But if I come over to F10, let's see what we get when I do opacity on this, if it's even going to work, because it's above everything else. Yep, there it goes. Now you see, I put an opacity channel on it, and what we're seeing is the back side of the runes on the other side. See? So that's the other rune over there. Turn it around, there's the runes cutting through. So opacity works, and you can't see it in here. You just have to test it out inside of here. instead of the rendering side. But if we go back and let's see what happens if we turn this on and then do opacity. That's a good question. Okay. Now it's kind of glowing and it's opaque. It's kind of weird, but it works. Okay, so the last thing we talked about doing, I'm going to turn off opacity because I really don't like it, but the last thing we talked about doing is adding rust. So I'm going to turn this around so we can see it. We did do this in class the other day, but I'm going to show you again just because some people seem to be a little bit lost on it. So we'll come off of there and then just add a... I'm going to open up this layer here. I'm going to go to, let's try materials, find a good rust texture like this one. I'm going to drag it on the object. And then when I turn that on the object, you'll see that my opacity and stuff are still going through because that's the only thing that's doing that. You'll notice that there is no height that is fighting with it. That's interesting, actually. I wonder if I turn this off. Yep, it's still fighting, so you can see some of the rust opacity in there. Okay, so what we want to do is now make this rust work on something that we already have. So how do we do that? Well, we open up our material, our shelf, and we go to Smart Masks. And there's a couple ways to do this. For right now, just do it this way. You can look at the rust, you can look at rust strips, you can look at rust ground, you can say subtle scratches, but this is basically what you do. So I'd come in here and I'd say rust. I'll just throw rust, I'm going to drag it off of here a little bit, rust onto this. I just drag that mask straight onto the layer I want it to be on, and it puts the rust on for me. Now the funny thing is, like I talked about the other day, bronze, well, bronze might rust actually, comes in, but copper, most core metals don't rust because they don't have the iron, but I think bronze actually has iron in it, so there you go. So there you go. Now you can come in here and mess with the rust inside of here. You can change the thickness of it, make it more rusty. You can turn it a little bit more towards the edges. You can also say, oh wow, I just want it on the blade for this example. So you come into the rust and then you say go to the mask editor and then you say add, oops, wrong button. Come in here and say add paint. And in the paint, what you're allowing yourself to do is add your own version to this. So I could take this brush, turn it to black, and it will paint that out. Or I could do what I love to do and use this and just grab everything but that. Just like that. And then I can come back out of there and I've got rust just on the blade. Or I guess I missed some. So you can open up the 2D, 3D, look at this right here, go here. If you have it set to this, it means it's going to grab the island. If you have it set to this, it's going to grab the polygon. If you have it set to this, yeah, it's going to grab, let me just do this one. There. So now we've got that off of there, and bam, and bam. Now let's say we want to do some scratches. I'll do one more thing on here so you can see. So I've got a rusty blade and I want to add some scratches to this. This lighting's pretty drastic. Let me go change that lighting. So soft one front, let's do a little bit more. What that need there. Let's grab something like this. Let's just do, okay. So we've got our rust, we've got our stuff like that. Now let's do some scratches. So how would I do scratches? Well, it depends on what you want your scratches to look like. If you know what color you want your scratch, if you scratch certain metals, it's going to have a different color to it. If it's a fresh scratch, it's going to be white, so you're going to see the tint change. If it's a older scratch, it's probably built up some residue inside of it, so it's going to be darker. So if I'm going to do a scratch, let me click this off. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go to materials. I'm going to find, I don't know, let's do something white. Yeah, white. So it shows. Nickel's pretty good. let's throw some nickel on there and just throw it up top like that. So now I've got this sword with some nickel on it, and of course everything is nickel now. So what do? Put a mask on that's a black mask, and then instead of doing it by dragging a smart mask on here, I could do it like this. I could say add. No, let's just do the smart mask for today, and we'll talk about the other stuff next on Monday. So I'm going to remove this one, and I'll open this back up, and I'll go to my smart material, or smart masks, excuse me, and I'll look for here, and you'll see soft damage. We'll take a look at that one. It looks pretty soft. I don't know if I like that. What about this one? Stains. That one's not horrible, but I'm really looking for some surface rust. That would have been good. Let's look for sharp dirt. Let's look at surface 1. It's not horrible. Oxidation is probably what we should have done for the copper. But it's not copper, it's bronze. Edge scratch. Let's do this one. Again, we just drag it and throw it on top of here. And now we can start to see, come down to the sharpen, turn off the sharpen intensity, come down to the metal wear. All we're doing is messing around with some of these things, like we want the contrast a little bit higher or lower. We want the wear level to be higher. You know, obviously you could also just paint in your own wear. Edge smoothness. Let's do the grunge amount down a little bit so we just get some on that edge, and I don't want that smooth actually. And then I do want wear contrast. I do want wear level up. So if I turn that grunge scale down. Now, the other thing you can do is you can move this below rust, and hopefully the rust would start to feel like it was on top of it, or maybe I do like it on top. Like that. And then maybe you could take this and change it from normal to something like overlay. Yeah, I don't like the overlay. How about lighten? That way it scratches the rust too. Okay, so now we got a rusty blade. Oh, except for one thing I did forget to do is this bottom hammer. So what do? Come up to this wand and I say add paint. And again, I can just take this, come to here, make sure it's on black, and just grab the areas I don't want to be filled with that, and make sure we get it all. Okay. Back out of here. And there we go. Now if I go to F10, let's say F. Now I got a magic purpley sword digging in. You can do some crystals if you want. I could turn that back on for the opacity. You only have to do 3 swords. You just have to have all the multipliers in there. So wood sword, a rusty sword, some embossing, some engraving, and that's it. All right, I will talk to you guys later. You all later.